Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chantel, and today I'm going to be doing a midweek movies review, but this is going to be 6 reviews actually, because I'm going to be doing my recap of the films that I watched in the month of June 2026, minus the one that I've already done a review on, which was Disclosure Day. So I have been picking up the pace of my movie watching in the same way that I've been picking up the pace of my reading after kind of being in a bit of a slump for some of the winter and some of the spring. And so I'm now at a point where I feel like I can start doing more movie reviews again. And so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to start by doing basically a recap of the movies that I watched in June in the same way that I do a reading recap. So yeah, I have 6 movies to talk about in this video. As I said, I already did a full review of Disclosure Day, which I'll probably link in the description below or put a little whatever link to it somewhere so that you can watch that. And then I'm going to talk about the other 6 movies that I watched in June. So let's do it. So, the first movie that I want to talk about today is Toy Story 5. This is a new release, a 2026 release, directed by Andrew Stanton. I saw this in the theater. I took my nephew to see it. He's a big Toy Story fan, and frankly, I'm also a Toy Story fan. I like the Toy Story movies. I think that they are generally very good at tapping into anxieties about growing up and raising kids, and in that way they are often very emotionally affecting, and to some extent I think Toy Story 5 is no exception. The basic story of Toy Story 5 is that Bonnie, our human child, is having trouble connecting with the other kids in her class, and so her parents buy her a tablet, a lily pad. And this lily pad, Lily, the device, comes into conflict with her toys, led by Jessie. Right? Jessie is sort of the main protagonist of Toy Story 5. And Lily, the tablet, is in some ways is kind of the antagonist of Toy Story 5. And so there's a conflict there, right? The conflict between toys and devices, right? And kids are now on all these devices, right? So that's the main anxiety that this film is really digging into, is the shift from playing with dolls and toys and things to being on devices all the time, to being on tablets, to all of this screen time and social media stuff and group chats and things like that. And is that affecting kids negatively? How is that affecting the process of growing up and the standard things about childhood that we all kind of understand? How is that changing things for kids? And I think to some extent this does a really good job of exploring that. I think it's an incredibly optimistic take on the whole devices versus toys thing, which makes a certain amount of sense to me because Pixar has obviously always been at the forefront of technology, and so it's hard for me to envision a Pixar film that really sees technology as universally bad. But it does manage to problematize the whole device thing in I think a relatively nuanced way. I would say that overall, this is probably the weakest of the Toy Story films. But that's not saying a lot, because the bar for Toy Story is pretty damn high. Like, Toy Story 3 has me sobbing into my popcorn every time I watch it. So, like, there's, gradations there such that saying that Toy Story 5 is the weakest Toy Story movie still means that it's like a pretty watchable and fun movie. It just maybe doesn't quite hit the heights of some of the previous entries in the franchise. But overall, I think it's a good time. It's a little bloated. I feel like, I'm gonna be honest here, I don't know that Woody needed to be in this one at all. he feels kind of superfluous and just like kind of an excuse to have Tom Hanks keep coming back. He doesn't really do much for the story, and the subplot with all of the buzzes, it also is like, okay, I see how it comes together in the end, but again, for a lot of the movie, it feels a little bit superfluous, and it makes the movie feel a little bit bloated. I do enjoy the Jesse and Buzz romantic subplot. I think that is cute, and there's a lot of cute things in this movie. My 7-year-old nephew did give it his wholehearted thumbs up, so the kids seem to be enjoying it. So that's what I'll say about Toy Story 5. The next film that I want to talk about that I watched this month was The Celluloid Closet. This was originally released in 1995 or 96. It's directed by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman. This is a documentary based on Vito Russo's book of the same name. It explores the history of gay representation, LGBTQ representation in Hollywood movies through Hollywood history, from the earliest days of silent cinema through to what was then basically the present day of the mid-90s. And this was re-released in a new 4K restoration to celebrate its 30th anniversary during Pride Month, and I went to a screening of it at my local university-affiliated Cinematheque, and I haven't seen it in a really long time, but it's a really, I say, enjoyable documentary to watch. It's really pleasurable to watch. There's a ton of clips from a ton of movies all the way through Hollywood history, and in that way it's very broad in its scope, which I like. There's a lot of interviews with people. It's narrated by Lily Tomlin. There's a lot of interviews with celebrities, actors, writers, people involved in the industry talking about, and there's one or two film historians as well that were interviewed for this film. And they're talking about the history of representation. They're also often talking about their own experiences watching some of these films and their own experiences occasionally being involved in some of these films, writing, directing, acting in some of these films. So it's a broad swathe of films, and I think it's a decent documentary as such. I would say, if you're already very familiar with the history of Hollywood cinema and with LGBTQ history, this is not going to tell you anything you didn't already know, but it does often do a good job of personalizing it, and many of the interviewees are very willing to discuss their own personal experiences, again, watching these films and being involved in some of these films, which I think makes it really interesting on some level. And I do think some of the conflicts around representation do get discussed in some interesting ways that I liked. There's a great moment when Harvey Fierstein is talking about the sissy archetype in early Hollywood films, right? The sissy archetype is the effeminate man that is always played for laughs, right? Is always very asexual, right? Because you can't actually depict explicit homosexuality, but you can depict an effeminate man and call him a sissy, and everybody knows what that means, right? So that's a really common trope in early Hollywood, and Harvey Fierstein in his interview is talking about it. And, the documentary discusses, what a negative trope this is and how damaging it is, and how it invites everybody to sort of laugh at the man who is unable to perform masculinity in the correct way, and how that is bad, But Harvey Fierstein in his interview talks about it. He's very apologetic when he says, I kind of liked the sissy, right? I kind of enjoy that character trope. He's very sort of self-effacing and apologetic about it, because he talks about it. He says, he's like, yeah, it's bad representation. It's not good representation, but at least it's something, right? It is representation. And he sort of ends it with, and also I'm a sissy, right? So like, in some, he talks about it in the way that, you know, on some level he could see himself in that character trope, and he's sort of, in a weird way, he's complicating the narrative a little bit of, you know, and brings in the idea of, like, you know, the queer audience watching these films and needing to find themselves in them, and even if it's a bad stereotype or a negative stereotype, still finding ways to find pleasure in those representations, which I think is a really interesting nuance to bring to it. But overall, I think this is a decent movie. It's enjoyable, and you can learn a lot from it. And God knows there's a lot of clips from a lot of films that some of which are relatively obscure now, and you may not be aware of. And also, I feel like because this was released in the 90s, it's very optimistic about the future, what was then the future of gay representation in Hollywood. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of that has really come to pass, but it is really interesting as a sort of time capsule of the mid-90s. So that's the Celluloid Closet. The next film I want to talk about is a rewatch of an old favorite. I was needing a comfort watch a couple weeks ago. I just needed something to put on that I've seen a million times and that I know is going to make me happy. And I'd recently picked up a 4K disc of Singin' in the Rain, released in 1952, directed by Stanley, Donen, and Gene Kelly. I don't know that there's a whole lot that I need to say about Singin' in the Rain. I think it's a pretty ubiquitous film. It's one of the best movie musicals ever made, arguably. It is a movie about movies, which is a really fun metatextual kind of subgenre that I always enjoy. And it is specifically set in the late 1920s. Right? Gene Kelly plays silent film star who is struggling with the transition from silent film to sound film. And we see this comedically played out in some very fun ways that are often very reflective of the actual problems that film studios had in making the transition from silent to sound cinema. And it's done in such a fun, frothy, lighthearted way with some really catchy musical numbers, and Debbie Reynolds plays Gene Kelly's love interest, who is bright and vivacious. Donald O'Connor steals the show in this as Gene Kelly's best buddy. The Make 'em Laugh number in this film is one of the funniest and most enjoyable musical numbers you will ever watch in a movie. And then, of course, there's the iconic titular Singin' in the Rain number, which is fantastic, beautifully shot, and wonderfully choreographed. So yeah, Singin' in the Rain is always a delightful film to watch in beautiful Technicolor. The fourth film I want to talk about in this video is The Sting, released in 1973, directed by George Roy Hill. This is the OG heist / con man movie. It stars Paul Newman and Robert Redford at their most attractive. Both of them at their absolute most attractive. The basic plot of this is that Robert Redford is like kind of a low level con man, and he and his partner get involved accidentally, sort of tangled up in a gangster's business when they rob the wrong guy, and his partner gets killed, and the gangster's trying to kill Robert Redford as well. And so he goes to Chicago and teams up with Paul Newman in order to pull off the biggest, most complex con on this gangster that you could possibly imagine. And it's a wild ride. It's super fun. Everybody is just having a really great time in this film. It's very engrossing. Again, it's shot beautifully. Both Robert Redford and Paul Newman have these piercing blue eyes, and this film shows off both of them to fantastic effect. Yeah, it's just a really, really enjoyable movie with a really twisty kind of plot that will surprise you and delight you, and you can see why this was kind of the blueprint for a lot of heist and con movies in the future, right? So it was a super fun movie to watch. The penultimate film that I would like to talk about in this video is Out of the Past, the classic film noir released in 1947, directed by Jacques Tourneur. This stars Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer, and also has Kirk Douglas in an amazing supporting role. Out of the Past is very much a classic for a reason. It's a crime noir about a guy who has a really shady past, and he's trying to get away from it, but then somebody from his past finds him and sort of drags him back into it, and he is forced to, he's sort of forced, almost blackmailed into working for his old boss, so to speak, and doing some things for him that are very shady. And he's Robert Mitchum is really great at being sort of stoic and looking like he's, you know, his face is so subtly expressive, and you really feel for him. You want him to try to disentangle himself from all of this so that he can just go back and to his nice, you know, his nice small town girlfriend and live a normal life. But of course this is a noir, so nothing is going to turn out well for any of these characters, really. But it's a wild ride. It's very enjoyable. The plot is incredibly complicated and twisty, and like, even I, who have watched many films and many film noirs, had a hard time. There was some points where I'm like, I don't understand why anybody's doing what they're doing at this point. But of course, in a film noir, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that everybody's really shady and doing really shady things to each other. So it's like, don't worry about it. Yeah, and the black and white cinematography is gorgeous here. And yeah, it was a great time. I had a really good time with this one. So yeah, that's what I have to say about Out of the Past. And then the final film that I want to talk about this month, the last film I watched this in June, and I think probably my favorite watch of June, was Point Break. This is the cult classic action film from 1991, directed by Kathryn Bigelow, starring Keanu Reeves and the late great Patrick Swayze. I was looking for something summery, something beachy vibes, summery vibes, and there's nothing more beachy and summery than Point Break. It is a ridiculous, almost campy setup where Keanu Reeves plays Johnny Utah. He's a fresh-faced, new FBI agent right out of Quantico, and he's assigned to the Los Angeles office, and he and his partner, played by an amazing Gary Busey, are investigating this gang of bank robbers that call themselves the ex-presidents because they wear presidential masks when they go and rob the banks. And they're convinced that this gang of bank robbers is actually a surfer gang. And so Keanu Reeves has to go undercover as a surfer in the surf culture of Los Angeles in the early 90s in order to sort of suss out this gang of bank robbers. And Patrick Swayze is the very alluring and charismatic surfer dude that Keanu Reeves sort of falls in with, and their relationship becomes incredibly homoerotic, and the action scenes in this film are amazing. The surfing scenes in this film are beautifully shot. There's so much eye candy in this movie. Young Keanu Reeves is absolutely beautiful to watch, and Patrick Swayze was such a good actor, and he's so good in this. He's very, very good. Lori Petty is Keanu Reeves' female love interest, and she's beautiful and compelling in her role. This is just a lot of over-the-top fun. There's a fantastic foot chase scene in this film that is just beautifully shot. It's amazing to watch. Bigelow has such an eye for action and for rising and falling tension that, everything is so heightened in this film that it all just works beautifully for me. And so I had such a good time with Point Break. It's such a watchable, fun movie that has inspired many films since and has become a cult classic for a reason. And it's amazing. And if you ever needed to watch Keanu Reeves just sort of roll around on the ground and shoot his gun in the air going, it's that's what happens in this movie. It's great. I love it. That was my month in movies, my June 2026 month in movies. Had some really great watches, and I've already had one really great watch for July as well. So I'm really looking forward to what I'm going to be seeing in July. Let me know in the comments below if you like any of these movies, if you've seen them, or if you want to see them, if you watched any great movies in the month of June. Let's talk about movies, and like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.